Hello, welcome back to another session breakdown. I'm just going to talk about a track that I just released with Sonderhaus called Persist. It's from an upcoming EP that I have of the same name. There will be 4 tracks total on the EP. Sorry, I was just looking at myself. If you'll notice, I've upgraded my camera setup. I'm just staring off admiringly at myself. It's not my raging narcissism. It is, in fact, the upgrade, and it just looks fantastic, I gotta say. The best part about it is with the depth of field and the slightly blurred background, it looks like my studio is clean and you can't see all the stuff lying all over the floor. So this is Persist. This is the first single from the EP. As I said, it's out now. You can listen to it in the link below. On Spotify, Apple Music, all those usual places where you listen to stuff. So, we'll just dive right in. Go ahead and grab a juice box, Yoo-hoo, any child beverage of your choice, and we'll get cracking. So as you can see, as we dive into the session itself, there is significantly less to talk about in this track as far as production. It's quite a bit different than the last track that I broke down, the last session that we were in of the Lost Art of Surrender stuff. This is a felt piano solo, kind of, felt piano track. You can see there is another set of tracks here, which is just some ambience in the background, second layer, if you will. All we have here is a pair of stereo mics. These are the Octavas, and I had at this point just one mic in the middle to kind of capture the center image. I was using a spaced pair of the Octavas, and there's a little hole in the image right in the middle with that setup. I've changed setup since slightly, which I'll get into later. So I wanted a mono mic right there dead center. And for that, I used the CAD or CAD. I don't know how you pronounce it. And that mic, I don't remember which mic it is. It's a large diaphragm condenser. Very cheap microphone. Something 2000? GSGL? Maybe? No, that's not. Maybe. Let's Google it, shall we? Large diaphragm condenser. GXL 2200. That's it. Yeah, so I was sort of right, almost. So yeah, I used to use those mics as a stereo pair. I have 2 of them. They're very cheap microphones. And yeah, I used them for years. Pretty much anything piano that I've done up until this year was recorded with those. So yeah, up until the last couple months, actually, since I got the new piano downstairs. Yeah, so this was recorded in my living room, which is 2 floors below where I'm sitting right now. And I used the Octavas, I used the CAD, and then, yeah, that's basically it. Not a lot to do, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through the chain. Okay, so here on the Octavas, there's just a tiny bit of buildup in the low mids, like around 215 to, I would say between 215 and 250 in that range, which I've noticed pretty consistently. I'm having to notch that out when I record down there. I don't know if it's the microphones, a combination of the mics and the piano, the fact that it's in a living room, which is not an ideal acoustic environment. It's kind of live down there. We have hard floors, so yeah, not the greatest space to record in probably, but it sounds okay. And with a little bit of EQing, you can get by. I just got some compression just to bring the levels up primarily. It's not, it may be knocking off some peaks ever so slightly, but not a ton. The Neutron 2, which I have, funny story, okay? and some of you might be able to relate to this. I'm classically trained piano player. Okay, I didn't know anything about mixing or any of this when I started, and when I heard about isotope neutron and the track assist and the fact that it can do like machine learning in some way, it sounded to me like a great way that I could just have something else mix my tracks for me, right? Without me actually having to know what I was doing. Turns out it's just a good tool. Sometimes it can give you a good starting point, but you actually still have to know how to use that tool to get the most out of it, right? So yeah, you could put neutron on everything and just let it machine learn stuff, and it might be okay-ish. I definitely did some of that in the beginning. But most of the time, it's just going to give you a good starting point, and most of the time I found it does way too much, so then I end up dialing stuff back. I don't even use the track assist. Like, this is just the EQ itself. It's not even the full instance of neutron. So just a little tip, don't expect plugins or machines to be able to mix or produce for you. You're actually probably better off just learning how to do stuff yourself. So it takes time, takes experience, but hey, that's why we keep learning, right? Okay, so basically I've just used this as my dynamic EQ. That's why I use this plugin. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the Fab Filter stuff yet. Okay, I am well on my way to a waves-free existence in the future, and I plan to switch over to Fab Filter entirely because Waves licensing issues are the devil. So I would love to not have to deal with that ever again. So all this is doing, we can put this on. Let's see. So you can see all of this build up right here, right? And I have that kind of ostinato thing that continues on in the right hand throughout this piece almost. And that's just knocking some of that out, right? And you say, oh my gosh, you're taking out 7.2 dB of this? Well, no, because it's in dynamic mode. So it's only if it goes over this 42 decibel threshold, negative 42 decibel threshold, that's the only time it's going to dip down. And you see it is not dipping all the way down there, okay? So if I take it out of dynamic mode, you're going to hear a lot of the body drop out. With dynamic mode activated, it keeps some of that fullness in the track without having too much buildup when those peaks are happening. So yeah, that's dynamic EQ. That's how that works. Knocked a little bit of hiss out of the highs too, because I'm actually going to be adding some of that later on with additive EQ, and this is mainly my surgical EQ here. Okay, so I'm looking for bad frequencies or frequencies that are a little irritating, removing those. Okay, so that's the octavas. Let's move on to the CAD, which, if you'll notice, I'm just using one of them, and it's mono right up the middle because that's what I needed, right? What that also does, now I've got a little delay happening on that as well. Okay, now this CAD, whatever you want to call it, microphone coming right dead center, just a mono signal up the middle, was initially just supposed to kind of fill in the stereo field, right? So like, yeah, it gives you something front and center that you can focus on, and kind of fills in that space that the octavas might lack a little bit. However, I get quite bored with production on these solo felt piano things. I know it's about simplicity and all of that, but let's face it, most of the tracks aren't all that interesting hopefully this is an exception and that there are some interesting harmonies and stuff, but I just get bored really fast, really easily. So I find myself wanting to do something interesting with the production, even if it is a simple production. In this case, what I chose to do is throw some effects on this center channel microphone, this mono microphone, and pan it around a little bit. So if you hear kind of a swirling effect in the track, that's this particular microphone. And it's mono, so I don't have to worry about like weird phase stuff happening, you know. So by itself, without the panning and without the effects, it sounds like this. I have quite a bit of reverb on that through a send. That's black hole. Oh, yeah, I did something here too. So without the reverb, fine, whatever. I put a little bit of Echo Boy on that. Space Echo. That stayed in. Space Echo, a little bit of mix, just a little bit. So just gives it a little movement. Then I put an amp simulator on it because why not? I kind of like amp simulation, reamping, but since I don't actually have amps, it's just amping, I guess, for me. You can hear how that brings out all of the transients, all of the high frequency stuff, but not the super highs, right? That's one thing that distortion and amp simulations do. They kind of box in the sound or box in the frequency range, I've found. And that's why often, to me, it's easier to mix those types of sounds because they're already limited. They're not taking up all the space. So I have it set to mono because coming out of Echo Boy, that would have made it stereo. I don't want that. I want it to stay mono because I'm going to do this. I'm going to auto pan it. Now, what is this thing? That's an envelope follower, which I wouldn't know how to use or what that was probably if it wasn't for modular synthesis. And Ableton is essentially like a big modular system, okay? So it has LFOs, it has envelope followers, it has all of these utilities that maybe if you haven't put your hands on the actual thing, you might not understand what they are or how you can implement them. But in this case, I am using an envelope follower, which is taking the signal. You'll see this. It's taking the audio signal when it reaches a certain point, and it's controlling the rate of the auto pan. Okay? In other words, when the signal gets louder, the rate gets faster of the pan. So that keeps it from just being a steady, kind of boring back and forth sine wave sweep. And just adds a little bit more character and interest to it, to me. It's just a little move that makes a big difference to me. It keeps it from being quite so predictable. Little EQ on this one as well. Slightly higher than before, just taking out a little bit of those low mids again. I'm going to bring that down. I think that was on negative 1.1, and I think this was on like maybe 11. So now you can hear when it's placed in that black hole reverb. That's nice. I like that. Sorry, I went a little Garth Brooks there.
I like that. I like that.
I mentioned that I also did something with the black hole reverb. Okay. I'm not sure why that mix isn't all the way up. It should be. One thing that I love about putting your reverbs on a send is then you can have your own effects chain after the reverb. One thing that I like to do a lot is adding distortion after the reverb. In this case, it's Decapitator, which, as we've mentioned in the past, is awesome, so why not use it? See, I'm pushing it pretty hard. Without that, brings out all of these textures, right? Now, if you'll notice, this mix knob is just wiggling a little bit back and forth all by itself. And that's because I used another envelope follower, which takes the signal again and just kind of, just kind of plays with the mix amount of Decapitator. So it's bringing that distortion in and out ever so slightly. So these are small changes that can make a big difference when you put them all together. Okay, I'm going to bring that down. So all together, one other thing you might notice, I've got the Valhalla vintage verb. Fantastic reverb. I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of that if you make music, and if you don't make music, you're probably not watching this to this point anyway. So yeah, the octavas, they're going through the Valhalla. The CAD, CAD, is going through Black Hole. So here in the purple, we have layer 2, which is more of an ambient. Ambient? Wow, that was pretentious. Ambient, as we Americans like to say, especially when we're from Mississippi. So this is our ambient layer, okay? Which is funny that I should mention an ambient layer, because I've often considered the space to be an ambient layer. So you see I have the same mic configuration here, doing basically the same thing, but this one is soaked in reverb. And when I say soaked in reverb, I mean still through reverb sends, because then you have more control. It's going through the black hole. And when you add that with it's just a nice background texture. It gives it a lot more space to me. See, I brought that down almost 10 dB. So it's not supposed to be in your face. It's supposed to be ambience. Okay, so here you can see I've got a few more things. I mentioned additive EQ. And for that I'm using a SSL 4000 emulation. This is from Plugin Alliance. There are lots of emulations of this console out there. This is just the one that I use. You can see I've added some highs. I've scooped out some of that around. Again, I mentioned like somewhere in that mid 200 range just is a little bit boomy with that particular piano in that particular space. So I took some of that out and boosted just below that, well, a little bit below that at 87, 88. A little bit of compression there as well. Then I did some more of that. So you may be wondering why I've got like multiple, like, well, you've just EQ'd here and you have another EQ here and you have an EQ here. Why? Because most of the time I like for my EQs, especially these kind of surgical graphic EQs, to be doing like one thing or two things max, just because visually I can see that better, and I'm also able to just have more control over that one thing. So maybe that's bad. Maybe I'll cut this from the video and pretend like I don't do that, but whatever. See, I'm removing everything below 160 from this ambient layer because I don't need any of that. All of the rich bass is coming from this main focused layer. Several of you have asked about my mastering chain in the past, which I do master most of my own music. And typically what I would do is I would bounce this down at about -6 dB, so I've got plenty of headroom to play with. And in Cubase, I would master. It's just a separate environment. It makes me think of mastering as a separate stage, which it is a separate stage in the process. In this case, this track happened rather quickly. This whole EP happened rather quickly. They were kind of improvised over the course of a week. And then I went back in and kind of fleshed the ideas out a bit more after that. But yeah, it was a really fast process, and I kind of wanted to just get these out in the world as a more spontaneous sort of thing. Palette cleanser for me. So you can see the mastering chain here. I've got a little bit of, I mean, just a tad. I think this is just kind of tickling. Here, let's go to the biggest peak here. Solo. Yeah, so that's as far as it ever goes, like maybe 1 dB of gain reduction here. And then I'm getting a little bit of level here. And you know, gain staging, I'm adding a little bit of level here. This is my favorite mastering compressor in the world. Not that I've tried all of them, but in my world, this is my favorite. This is the Elysia Alpha Master. It's based on a piece of hardware which I didn't have like 15 grand to spend on. They're really pricey, but this is a really good emulation made by the actual people who make the hardware unit, so, and then released through Plugin Alliance. Plugin Alliance, kind of weird. It's one of those subscription-based models, but what you can do is you can, you know, sign up for a year, which is reasonably affordable, and then throughout that year they will send you vouchers on and coupons on various plugins, and you wait until the ones that you found that you like come up on sale. Like I ended up buying this outright for like 30 bucks, 40 bucks, and normally it's like a, I don't know, $150, $200, maybe more, I don't remember, plugin normally. But yeah, so you just kind of go shopping throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, you've paid less for the subscription and probably most of the plugins that you actually want to keep from them than you would have if you just bought those outright upfront without going through their subscription. So be careful with it, because I know subscriptions can be kind of like, don't forget that you have a subscription and then not be able to feed your family, you know, when it rolls back around the next year. But this is not financial advice to the moon. But yeah, this is a mid-side compressor, and I've got it doing, again, not a ton of gain reduction. It's not even touching anything that's under 300 hertz. Starting to tickle the compressor. Got the sides boosted just a little bit for a little extra width. So I'm not going to go through a tutorial on the Elysia Alpha master compressor today, but it is really good, and we could spend a lot of time talking about the things that it does. Another Plugin Alliance plugin that I liked is the Moog Audio EQ4, which has this really good air band. that a lot of people like, and I'm one of them. So yeah, it's doing a little bit of master EQing stuff, just boosting a little bit here, cutting a little bit there. And these are very small, half a dB, because it is on the master bus, right? Very small moves. Everyone's favorite, Ozone. I don't know what, I think 8 is the most recent one, right? I can't remember. Anyway, Isotope, always great stuff. You can see, even after all of that we've done before, I still wasn't satisfied. I felt like this was just a little tubby in the mid 200s. So I took a little bit out of that and boosted right below that, which I think I did the same thing in the SSL or one of those other 10 EQs that I've used. Multi-band compression. Guess what? It's taken some out of that tubby range, right? So every once in a while, when we get a peak, it's going to come above and just knock that down a little bit. Again, on your mastering chain, or if you're mastering, it's all about small moves, I've found, right? A lot of small moves that can lead to big results at the end, so you have to be really careful. Let's unsolo that, because that's really obnoxious. Sounds like we're listening in a phone booth. All right. Vintage tape emulation, which just makes it sound like I ran it through a tape deck, which I have, but was too lazy to do. So if you don't have one, this is a pretty good substitute. And then my main limiter, which is probably knocking off like maybe 2 dB, 2.5 tops, because by this point, hopefully I've gotten out all of those frequencies that would be causing the really spiky peaks, right? Okay. Then I've got another limiter with a really fast release that's just catching some of those very last peaks, and it actually adds some width to the track. Very, very subtle. I don't remember where I got this tip from. It was from watching some YouTube video from someone who actually knew what they were doing, and I could really hear the difference in the width. And when I say really hear the difference, I mean I could barely tell the difference. But that's the kind of thing you're going for in mastering. It's just to get it to that next, hopefully from good to great, right? It's your last element of polish, really. This is just a voiceover sidechain compressor, so that when I talk really loud, the track gets quieter and you can hear what I'm saying, and when I talk softly, the track comes back in. So this has nothing to do with the track whatsoever, in actuality, but it's how YouTube works. And this is just sending the audio of my DAW to OBS, so you don't care about that either. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this one. I feel like maybe I'm getting a little more comfortable talking in front of the camera, which unfortunately for you means I'm thinking about doing even more of these. So if you have anything that you would like from my back catalog of works that you would like for me to walk through or do a breakdown of, leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you on that. Can't promise a video for everything, but yeah, I'm going to try to do as many of these as I can, because this is stuff that I've already done, so just talking you through what I did seems like a good way for you to maybe get something out of it. And also, it's kind of fun for me to go back and see what I did, especially on older things. That would be really interesting and would be a great lesson in what not to ever do. So yeah, that might actually be more helpful. Thanks for watching. Once again, I'm terrible at outros and whatnot, but I'm just going to leave you with the dulcet tones of this track, because the sati that I used for comedic effect last time got me a copyright claim. So and if you could hit like and subscribe if you haven't already done that, because that's the thing we're supposed to say here on YouTube for the algorithm so that people will like us.